Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked room today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret?
The Stranger of the Night by Edgar Wallace. The little instrument on the table by the inspector's desk went tick-tock. Then it stopped, as though considering how it should word the message it had to give. It was very still in the charge room, so still that the big clock above the fireplace was audible. That and the squeaky scratching of the inspector's quill pen as it moved slowly over the yellow paper on the desk before him were the only sounds in the room. Outside it was raining softly, the streets were deserted, and the lines of lamps stretching east and west emphasized the loneliness. "Tick-tock," said the instrument on the table excitedly. "Tick-tock, tick-tock." The inspector's high stool creaked as he sat up, listening. There was a constable at the door, and he too heard the frantic call. "What's that, Gill?" demanded the inspector testily. The constable came into the charge room with heavy footsteps. "Tickety-tickety-tock-tock," babbled the instrument, and the constable wrote the message. "All stations arrest and detain George Thomas on ticket of leave, aged 35, height 5'8", complexion and hair dark, eyes brown, of gentlemanly appearance, suspected of being concerned in warehouse robbery. Walthamstow and Canning Town especially note this and acknowledge S.Y." "In the middle of the night?" exclaimed the inspector despairingly. "They call me up to tell me what I've told them hours and hours ago. What a system!" He nodded his head hopelessly. Outside, in the thin rain, a man was coming along the street, his hands deep in his pockets, his coat collar turned up, his head on his breast. He shuffled along, his boots squelching in the rain, and slackened his pace as he came up to the station. The policeman he expected to find at the door was absent. The man stood uneasily at the foot of the steps, set his teeth, and mounted slowly. He halted again in the passage out of which the charge room opened. "It's a rum thing about Thomas," said the inspector's voice. "I thought he was trying to go straight." "It's his wife, sir," said the constable, and there was a long silence broken by the loud ticking of the clock. "Then why did his wife give him away?" asked the inspector. "Did she, sir?" There was surprise in the constable's voice, but the man in the passage did not hear that. He was leaning against the painted wall, his hand at his throat, his thin, unshaven face a dirty white, his lips trembling. "She gave him away," said the inspector. He spoke with the deliberation of a man enjoying the sensation of dispensing exclusive news. "Know her?" "Slightly, sir," said the policeman's voice. "Handsome woman. She might have done better than Thomas." "I think she has," said the constable dryly, and they both laughed. "That's the reason, is it? Wants to put him under the screw? Well, I've heard of such cases." The man in the passage crept quietly out. He was shaking in every limb. He almost fell at the last step and clutched the railings that bordered the station house to keep himself erect. The rain was pouring down, but he did not notice it. He was hocked, paralyzed by his knowledge. He had broken into a warehouse because she had laughed to scorn his attempted reformation. He had tried to go straight, and she had made him go crooked. And then, when the job was done, with all the old cleverness so that he left no trace of his identity, she had gone straight away to the police and put him away. But that was nothing. Women had done such things before, out of jealousy, in a fit of insane anger at some slight, real or fancied. But she had done it deliberately, wickedly, because she loved some man better than she loved him. He was cool now, seeing things very clearly, and quickened his walk until he was stepping out briskly and lightly, holding his head erect, as he had in the days when he was a junior in a broker's office, and she had been a novel-reading Miss of Balham. The rain streamed down his face. The cuffs of his thin jacket clung to his wrists. His trousers were soaked from thigh to ankle. He knew a little shop off the commercial road where they sold cheese and butter and wood. He had purchased for a penny a morsel of bread and cheese. He remembered that the woman behind the counter had cut the cheese with a heavy knife, newly whetted and pointed. He thought the matter out as he turned in the direction of the shop. Such knives are usually kept in a drawer next to the till, with the bacon saw and the milk tester, and the little rubber stamp which is used for branding margarine in accordance with the law. He knew the shop would be shuttered, the door locked, and he had no instrument to force an entrance. The kit was in the hands of the police. He had wondered how the Splits had found them. Now he knew. He gulped down a sob. Still, there must be a way. The knife was necessary. He was still weak from his last term of penal servitude. He couldn't kill her with his hands. She was so strong and beautiful. Oh, so beautiful. Thinking disconnectedly, he came to the shop. It stood in a little side street. There was one street lamp giving light to the thoroughfare. There was no sound but the dismal drip of rain. Nobody in sight. There was a skylight above the shuttered door. It was the only way. He saw that at once. Sometimes these are left unfastened. He stood on tiptoe and felt gingerly along the lower part of the sash. His fingers encountered something that lay on the edge, and his heart leapt. It was a key. He had guessed this to be a lock-up shop. He knew enough of the casual character of these little shopkeepers not to be surprised at the ease with which an entry might be effected. He slipped the key into the lock, turned it, and stepped in, closing the door behind him softly. The air of the shop was hot and stuffy, full of the pungent scent of foodstuffs, cheese and ham, and the resinous odour of firewood. He had matches in his pocket, but they were sodden and wouldn't strike. He fumbled round the shelves and came upon a packet. He struck a light, guarding the flame with his hand. The shop had been swept and made tidy for the night. The weights were neatly arranged on either side of the scales. There was a piece of muslin laid over the butter on the slat slab. On the counter, conspicuously displayed, was a note. It contained instructions, written in pencil in a large, uneducated hand, to Fred. He was to light the fire, put the kettle on, take in the milk and serve Mrs. Smith. Fred was the boy, the early comer in the morning, for whom the key had been placed. It was remarkable that he settled all these particulars to his own satisfaction. As lighting match after match, he sought the heavy knife with the sharp point and the newly whetted edge. He even felt a certain exultation in the ease in which he had gained admission to the shop, and had an insane desire to whistle and talk. He found the knife. It was under the counter, with a greatly scarred cutting board and a steel. He wrapped it up carefully in a sheet of newspaper, then remembered he was hungry. He broke off a wedge of cheese. There was no bread, but an open tin of children's biscuits was handy. With the food in his hand, with the knife in his pocket, he continued his exploration. Behind the shop was a little parlour. The door was unlocked, and he entered. He struck match after match, hesitated a moment, then lit the gas. It was a tiny room, cheaply but neatly furnished. There were china ornaments on the mantel-shelf, a few cheap lithographs on the wall, and a loudly ticking clock. There was a clock at the police station. He made a grimace as though he were in pain, felt with his hand for the knife, and smiled. He sat at a little table in the middle of the room and ate the food mechanically, staring hard at the wall ahead of him. He had done everything for her. His first crime, the few sovereigns extracted from the cash box. She had inspired that. Her little follies, her little extravagances, her vanities, these had been at the bottom of every step he had taken. Staring blankly at the wall with wide-opened eyes, he traced his descent. There was a text on the wall. He had been staring at it all this time. An ill-printed text, black and gold, green and vivid crimson, sadly out of register, and bearing in the bottom left-hand corner the conspicuous confession that it was printed in Saxony. His thoughts were elaborate thoughts, but inclined to dive sideways into inconsequent bypaths. Insensibly, he had fixed his eyes on the text, in a subconscious attempt to concentrate his thoughts. One half of his brain pursued the deadly course of retrospection. The other half grappled half-heartedly with the words on the wall. He read only those that were in capital letters. Behold, Lamb, God, taketh away sins, world. 3 years penal servitude for burglary, 2 terms of 6 months for breaking and entering. She had been at his elbow. Years ago, he was a member of a church, sang in the choir, and religious matters had some significance to him. It is strange how such things drop away from a grown man, how the sweet bloom of faith is rubbed off. He married her at a registry office in Marylebone, and they went to Brighton for their honeymoon. She knew well enough that he couldn't afford to live as they were living. He had never dreamt that she guessed that he was robbing his employer, and when coolly and with some amusement she revealed her knowledge, he was shocked, stunned. Behold, Lamb. Might religion have helped him had he kept closer to its teachings? He wondered, slowly munching his biscuit and cheese, with his eyes on the garish text. He found some milk and drank it. Then he rose. Where he had sat were 2 little pools of water, one on the floor, the other on the table where his arm had rested. He turned out the light, walked softly through the shop, listened, and opened the door gently. There was no one in sight, and he stepped out, closing and locking the door behind him. He put the key on the ledge where he had found it, and went quickly to the main road, the heavy knife newly whetted and with a sharp point bumping against his thigh with every step he took. He had an uneasy feeling, and strove to analyse it down to a first cause. He decided it was the text, and smiled. Then of a sudden the smile froze on his lips. He was not alone. A man had come from the night swiftly, silently, and walked with him, step for step. He stopped dead. His hand wandered down to the pocket where the knife lay. "What do you want?" he asked harshly. The other made no reply. His face was in the shadow. What clothes he wore, what manner of a man he was, Thomas could not say, only that, standing there, he was tall, gracefully proportioned, easy of movement. There was a silence. Then, "Come," said the man from the night, and the burglar accompanied him without question. They walked in silence, and Thomas observed that the stranger moved in the direction he himself would have taken. "I shall give myself up. Afterwards," he said, speaking feverishly fast, "I will end all this. End it. End it." It did not strike him as curious that he should plunge into most secret depths, revealing the innermost thoughts of his heart. He accepted, without wonder, the conviction that the stranger knew all. "She led me down from step to step. Down, down," sobbed Thomas, as they walked side by side through the narrow streets that led to the river. "It used to worry me at first, but she strangled my conscience. She laughed at my fears. She's a devil, I tell you." "Other men have said the woman tempted me," said the stranger gently. "Yet a man has thought and will of his own." Thomas shook his head doggedly. "I had no will where she was," he said. "When I have killed her, I shall be a man again." He tapped his pocket. The knife was still there. "If we'd had children, it might have made a difference, but she hated children." "If you were free of her, you might be a man," said the stranger. His voice was sweet and deep and sad. "Yes," the other turned on him eagerly. "That's what I mean. She is in my way. If I kill her, I can start all over again, can't I? I could go back and face the world and say, I've killed the bad part of me. Give me another chance. Look, He fumbled in his pocket and brought forth the knife. The rain came pitter-patter on the paper wrapping, and his hand trembled in his excited eagerness to display the strong blade with the silvery edge and the needle-like point. "I couldn't kill her with my hands," he said, breathing quickly, "so I've got this knife. I feel I've got to do it, though I hate killing things. I once killed a rabbit when I was a kiddie, and it haunted me for days." "If you were free of her, you might be a man," said the stranger again. Yes, yes, the thief nodded. "That's what I say. I could go back to the old people." His voice broke. "They don't know how far I've gone under." They turned corner after corner, crossing main thoroughfares, diving through alleys where costers' barrows were stacked, chained wheel to wheel, into mean streets and across patches of waste ground. Once, through a little passage, they came in sight of the river, saw 3 barges moored side by side, rising and falling softly with the tide. Out in mid-river a steamer lay, 3 lights glimmering feebly. "I shall go into the house from the back," Thomas said. "There's nobody else in the house but an old woman, or there oughtn't to be. My wife sleeps in the front room." "If you were free of her, you might be a man," said the stranger. "Yes, yes, yes!" The convict was impatient. "I know that. When I'm free." He laughed happily. "She dragged you down to the deeps," said the man of the night softly. "Every step you took for good, she clogged and hindered." "That's right. That's the truth," said the other. "Yet you could never escape her. You were loyal and faithful and kind." "God knows that's true," said the man, and wept. "For better or worse, for richer or poorer," he said, and it seemed to him that the stranger was saying these words at the same time. At last they reached a street that was more dark, more wretched than any of its neighbours. The man stopped at a narrow passage which led to the back of the houses. "I'm going in now," he said simply. "You wait for me here, and when I come back, we'll start our new life all over again. I shall kill her quickly." The man of the night made no reply, and Thomas went through the passage, turned at right angles along a narrower strip of path between wooden fences, and so came to a rickety back gate. He opened it and went in. He was in a dirty little yard littered with the jettison of a poor household. There was a tumble-down fowl run, and as he walked stealthily to the house, a cock crew loudly. The back room was empty, as he knew. He pushed up the window. It squeaked a little. He waited for the cock to crow again and mask the sound. Then he swung himself up to the window-sill and entered the room. The point of the knife cut through the thin clothing he wore, and he felt a sharp pain in his leg. He took the knife from his pocket and felt the edge. Then he became conscious of the fact that there was somebody in the room. He gripped the knife tightly and peered through the darkness. "Who's there?" he whispered. "It is I," said a voice he knew, the voice of the man of the night. How did you get in?" He was amazed and bewildered. "I came with you," said the voice. "Let us free ourselves of this woman. She dragged you down. She is the weed that chokes your soul." "Yes, yes," Thomas whispered, and reaching out, found the stranger's hand. Hand in hand they came to the woman's room. A cheap night-light was burning on the mantel-shelf. She lay with one bare arm thrown out of bed. Her breast rose and fell regularly. He had seen something else that had risen and fallen monotonously. What was it? Yes, barges on the river. She was handsome in a coarse way, and as she slept she smiled. Some movement of the man disturbed her, for she stirred and murmured a name. It was not the name of him who stood above her, a knife in his shaking hand. "Do you love her?" The stranger's voice was very soft. The husband shook his head. "Once, I thought so. Now," he shook his head again. Do you hate her? The thief was looking at the sleeping woman earnestly. I don't hate her, he said simply. I served her because it was my duty. Come, said the stranger, and they left the room together. Thomas unfastened the street door, and they passed again into the dreary night. I don't love her. I don't hate her, he said again, half to himself. I went to her because it was my duty. I worked and stole, and she betrayed me, so I thought I would kill her. The knife was still in his hand. In silence they traversed the way they came until they reached a little passage that led to the river. They turned into this. At the end of the passage was a flight of stone steps, and they heard the clug-clug of water as it washed them. Thomas raised his hand and sent the knife spinning into the river, and a voice hailed him from the foot of the steps. That you, Cole? His heart almost stopped beating. The voice was hard and metallic. He blinked as though awakened from a sleep. Is that you, Cole? Who is it? Thomas saw a boat at the bottom of the steps. There were 4 men in it, and one was holding fast with a boat hook to an iron ring let into the stone. Me, said the thief. It ain't Cole, said another voice disgustedly. Cole won't turn up, he's drunk. There was a whispering in the boat. Then an authoritative voice demanded, Want a job, my lad? Thomas went down 2 steps and bent forward. Yeah, I want a job, he said. A querulous voice said something about missing the tide. Can you cook? Yes, I can cook. He had been employed in this capacity in prison. Jump in. Sign you on tomorrow. We're going to Valparaiso, steam. How'd that suit you? Thomas was silent. I don't want to come back here, he said. We'll get a better man for the return voyage. Jump in. He got into the boat awkwardly, and the officer at the stern gave an order. The boat pushed off, and then the thief remembered the man of the night. He could see him plainer than ever he had seen him before. He was a radiant figure standing on the dark edge of the water, his hand outstretched in farewell. Thomas saw the face, beautiful and benevolent. He saw the faint light that seemed to surround him. Behold, muttered the man in the boat, it's strange how that text. Goodbye. Goodbye, sir. Who are you talking to, mate? Asked the sailor who was rowing. The man who was with me, said Thomas. There weren't no man with you, said the sailor scornfully. You was by yourself.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked room today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret?
So that was The Stranger in the Night by Edgar Wallace. I think it also appears as the Man in the Night. If you remember in the story, he refers to him as the Man in the Night. So it's an alternative title. So as you well know, this is a part of the podcast where I discuss the story and the author. So I'm going to say something about Edgar Wallace first, who may be known to many of you. Richard Horatio Edgar Wallace, born 1875 and died in 1932, was a prolific British author, playwright and journalist, renowned for his contributions to the thriller genre. Born in Greenwich, London, Wallace's life began under challenging circumstances. He was the illegitimate son of actors Richard Horatio married Edgar and Mary Jane Polly Richard, and was fostered by the Freeman family shortly after his birth. So he didn't have the easiest start. So his early life was marked by poverty and hardship. He left school at the age of 12, I said that, and took on various odd jobs before joining the army at 21. That's quite a long time. His career as a writer began during his military service in South Africa, where he was inspired by the works of Rudyard Kipling. Wallace produced his first book of ballads, The Mission That Failed, in 1898. In 1899, he left the army and turned to full-time writing, becoming a war correspondent for Reuters and the Daily Mail during the Boer War. Wallace's writing career flourished, and he established his own publishing company called Tallis Press and published Four Just Men in 1905, which was a success. Although the venture was financially mismanaged, Wallace continued to write prolifically. his experiences in the Congo Free State, where he reported on Belgian atrocities, inspired his serialized stories, which were later collected in the best-selling Sanders of the River, 1911. I need to slow down talking. Funnily enough, there was a guy who said about one of my things, it's best played at 1.75 times, and then somebody else said, no, I have to play it at 0.5. I'm like, yeah, I think I talk fast, actually. I've always been accused of that. From 1908 to 1932, Wallace's output was extraordinary. He wrote over 170 novels, 18 stage plays, and 9 fine 7 short stories. His works were translated into 28 languages and adapted into more than 160 films. He's apparently big in Germany and Poland, or he was. He became known as King of Thrillers, and his rapid writing style and ability to produce multiple works. And apparently what he used to do was he had wax cylinders, and he would dictate onto wax cylinders and send them off to his secretaries. And apparently he hated revising, and he would just send it off once he dictated it to the publishers, and they would tidy it up, but they wouldn't do much editing. And I think when you read this, it was a really easy book to read, to narrate. The prose is very craftsmanlike. I'm not saying anything about it being literature and profound, although we can talk about that a bit later on, but certainly his writing style is very effective, I think. It was said by his publishers that a quarter of all the books read in early 20th century England were written by Wallace. So he was a journalist. He wrote screenplays, poetry, historical novels, non-fiction, 18 stage plays, 957 short stories, and over 170 novels, as we've said. Of course, he is chiefly remembered today for his contribution to the screenplay for King Kong. Apparently, in 1931, he was moved to Hollywood to work as a scriptwriter for RKO. He was involved in the early development of King Kong, but he died of diabetes-related complications in 1932. Now, it's very interesting because when he was narrating his stories, I was reading to his cylinders, he would lock himself in a room with lots and lots of sweet tea and cigarettes. That'll probably do it. So there we are. Despite he got married to his secretary, his first wife, they lost a child. He married his secretary in 1921, and he had a daughter with her. And despite his success, his extravagant lifestyle and gambling led to continual financial difficulties. So this particular story, Stranger in the Night, was published in 1910, and I got it from the great book of giant book of ghost stories, edited by Richard Dolby, who was a fantastic editor in the 1980s. I mean, he had a huge output of any anthology, and then his wife took over. So a lot of ghost story anthologies from the 80s and 90s were edited by one or the other of these two, of the Dolbys. And they've got good taste, I think. I mean, particularly when they're putting together scores of stories. What we're going to say about this, so it starts off, and I'm sure you were thinking, he's got this mixed up. This is a detective story. This is one of the crime stories from his newfangled detective channel. But no. Although I probably could have got away with it putting on the classic detective podcast. If you haven't subscribed to that and you like detective stories, please do find it on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever. I think the only place you can't get it is Audible, because they hate me and I hate them, so we don't speak. And you may know the reasons for that. Okay, it could have been a detective story. The descriptions were so real. The rain, the rainy streets, the little shop, him sitting in that room reading that biblical tract. Now, I don't know anything about Wallace's religion. I would imagine if he was conventional, he would have been... apparently his father, who he wasn't brought up with because he was illegitimate, was a Catholic, but... Wallace himself, I don't know, may have been kind of Protestant, Church of England, Episcopalian, as they say in America. Now, so the story goes, it is a morality tale, isn't it? And it's a Christian morality tale as well. So this is like the Book of Tobit, isn't it? as you know, the Book of Tobit is part of the Apocrypha, so it is included in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles, but not in Protestant Bibles. But in the story, Tobit is a righteous Israelite and his son Tobias. And Tobias has his journey during which he is accompanied by the angel Raphael, who appears in disguise as a man. And he gives guidance and protection to Tobias from dangers, including a fish demon, fair enough. And at the end, Raphael reveals his true identity as an angel sent by God and healed Tobias and his family. I wonder if Edgar Wallace was doing a straight lift of this story. I mean, it isn't just the same story, but it is this guy who has done everything for a woman who has scorned him, and he blames her for driving him into sin. I suppose we would call it sin. I mean, he doesn't specifically call it sin, but that's what it is, isn't it? And the angel actually says at one point, "Do you not have a mind of your own?" I paraphrase. And of course, that's right. And then he wouldn't be the first man drawn into sin by a woman. I guess he's referencing Eve there. But the point is this, it's just an excuse. You don't have to do these things. She wasn't even that impressed in the end. So I think he's kidding himself, and I think it's just him making excuses for his own behaviour. Who knows? Maybe he did want to impress her, but it was very foolish. And now he feels he is so humiliated by her turning him into the police, and full of hate for her. And I suppose he feels he's not being appreciated for all these evil doing that he did in her name, apparently. So he thinks, well, I'm going to go and kill her. And he gets that description of how he gets the knife, I really like that, in that as a technique, it kind of really emphasized it. He tells you where the knife is, and he gives you step by step by step and all the little details. And very often, if you want to bring a reader into a story, you use specifics, very practical, specific details, and it drops them into the scene. And I think he does that really well. And then he's walking along the street. So that's the first part of the story. And the second part of the story is walking along the street, and this guy appears, and he kind of has an inkling about that this man is not just an ordinary man, because he immediately starts telling him all his troubles and what he's going to do. And the man doesn't try and stop him. And then when he gets in the window, another clue to the supernatural provenance of the stranger is that he's just in a room. And then they go and find the woman, and there she is with her coarse she's handsome, but it's coarse. I wonder what she looked like. I'd like to see a picture of her, just to say, it's handsome but a bit coarse. And he talks about it's his duty. And then the angel basically says, and that I mean, it's not for me to tell Edgar Wallace what to do, but I thought he could have kind of emphasised that little change, because there's a complete pivot. The tide then goes out, doesn't it? Suddenly we pivot, and he's going to kill her, and then the angel says, "Come on, lad, come on." And off they go. And then he gets a job as a sailor, so he gets to escape. So in a sense, his good deed in not murdering her, or he's turned to the good in shunning his evil impulses, is rewarded by going away to sea to Valparaiso and escaping. It reminds me of a sea shanty, that. I won't sing it for you because I can't remember it, but I once used to run the sea shanty festivals. That's a true thing, called the Songs of the Sea. At one point in my career, I did events, and one of ours, we did I maybe said before, we did a rum festival where we thought it was a great idea to give people free rum. Not a great idea, as the police told me afterwards. And then we did a matchmaking festival, whereby I really liked that, whereby you got fixed up with somebody, you just turned up and we would use our, but I am digressing now. But we also did a Songs of the Sea festival that had there's a sea shanty about Valparaiso. So he goes to Valparaiso, and the captain says, "We'll get a better man on the way back." So all they wanted is somebody who could cook a bit, which luckily, as Wallace drops in, "Oh yes, so happened he was a cook." I think it would have been neater if he could have just dropped that in at the very beginning, said at the very beginning he'd served time where he was employed as a cook, and then at the end it wouldn't have come so much as it's not a Deus Ex Machina, but you know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's convenient, isn't it? Whereas if you said it at the beginning, the reader would have gone, "Ah, yes, of course," rather than, "Ha, ha, ha, that's convenient." They go, "Ah, yes, of course." Anyway, so that's that. I enjoyed the story. I don't think it's a great piece of literature. It was a very well written story. It was unusual as a ghost story. It's a supernatural story more than a ghost story. Clearly, there's no ghost in it. But there's an angel in it. I believe it was an angel. And it's a moral story, and most stories are moral. Not a strictly ghost story. Doesn't, often ghost stories are a wrong has been done, a sin has been committed, and the ghost is there to punish the sin and right wrongs. Whereas this was more about a man making a moral choice with the aid, of course, Sophocles, who I sometimes talk about. He had this good spirit, the daemon, as they called him. Just, it was a spirit, wasn't it? If you follow, what's his name, Pullman, and the dust business, all that stuff, his dark materials, they all have these animal daemons. But Socrates didn't have a visible animal daemon. But the reason he drank hemlock, apparently, was because his daemon told him. He was thinking about leaving Athens and escaping with his life, and the daemon said, no, you've got to drink it. So he always did what his daemon said. So it's a good spirit. It's like this idea of having a good and a bad spirit on each shoulder, and this was his conscience in a sense, but personified, and I think very with echoes of the Book of Tobit, and the angel Raphael. So I liked it. I spent a lot of time saying that I liked it. I did. What else do I need to say? So I'm going to just kind of ramble. This has been a funny journey for me. It'll be 5 years I've been doing this, which is extraordinary. In September, didn't even begin to think about doing it, and it's done really well. And you may know I have my Amazon, for some reason, decided that I'd breached copyright and blocked me and were not amenable to discussion. I hadn't. I mean, I had inadvertently, but the publisher contacted me, this story, and said, oh, yes, fine, just change it. And I went, yeah, of course I'll change it. But Amazon and Audible were like, no, you are banned forever. Do not come to us. So I'm like, okay, up yours, I said. What was the point of my little rant there? I just lost focus because of that. Oh, yeah. So that taught me how uncertain and unreliable these streams of income are that you get from the internet. That was Audible doing. That was a chunk of my income gone on a whim of theirs. And with no recourse other than me paying a very expensive lawyer to, and I'm talking, it was a chunk of my income. It was hundreds of pounds, but it wasn't, worth the thousands that they would charge me to even begin, and that's without winning. So my madness, and there is method, is to, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Patreon. So if you want to please become a patron, that really helps me. But I've got 3 channels now. I've got 4 actually. I've got Ghosts, which I've been doing for 5 years. Detectives, which I've been doing for 6 months, but as a podcast has overtaken Ghosts. Incredible. Just shows what an appetite there is for detective stories. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do for a third one? And it's a process of throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. So I think I've got something that sticks, which is classic stories. So I thought about sci-fi, I thought about romance, and I felt my way in with those ones. But there is an appetite for literature, So I've just done a Virginia Woolf story and a Stefan Zweig story, and what's his name? That famous guy. Oh, come on. The Irish guy, wrote Finnegan's Wake. James Joyce, that's him. I did The Dead. And so I've done these, and there does appear to be an appetite. So if you listen to those, please, as well, if you want to. Maybe not your cup of tea. The other thing I've learned, if you hear a noise in the background, it's Callie asleep here. She's having dreams about something. And I may have to turn around and comfort her and take her little dog head in my hands and say, Callie, it's only a dream. And but back to what I was saying. So if you hear a noise, that's what it is. Or the jackdaws above. The scrap man has finished. I've had to change my days. I used to record during the day. Now I'm finished nursing. And the scrap man's very busy, and the park keepers keep cutting the grass. Then the lads go on their motorbikes illegally on the park, and it's very loud. So at it's in the evening now, and I've changed my life to make it easier to record. You may still hear things in the background. So it's been a funny old business. And what I was going to say was, have been listened too much to negative comments. There are always people who don't like what you do. It's just inevitable. If you're a baker and you're the best baker in the world and you make the best cakes in the world, and 1,000 people come in and 99 of them like your cakes, one of them is going to think your cake is rubbish, and they're going to tell you, or some of them may tell you, and that will hurt you, and you will listen to that. Funny enough, Sheila started doing sound baths there. She's got a crystal sound gong thingy doodads. They're very pleasant. I would like to record them, actually. And she says she'll let me, but she hasn't so far. She's out at a fire ceremony thing for the solstice tonight. So I'm with the dogs at home. And she was saying when she does this, it's like you put yourself out there when you're performing. And I said, I know what it's like. And she gets these feedback forms. And I read through them, and she's uncertain whether they're really good. It's really good feedback. And there was one comment that said something about it was a bit quiet. I think is that what they said. It was out of all of them. That's the one she listened to, and that's what we do, isn't it? When we get a little bit of criticism, that's what we listen to. So I have been guilty of giving too much heed to the naysayers, and if there are any naysayers listening now, I actually don't care what you think. Just go and listen to somebody else, because you're getting it for free. So hop off. And I will delete your comments, just so as you know. And if anybody sees any negative comments anywhere, I can't, just because who's it helping? So this is the new me, the new positive, tough me. If you're with me, you're with me. We are a tribe. If you're against me, leave. That's it. So that's new tough guy. That's it, tough guy. Anyway, thank you. I hope you like that one. Please do listen to my other channels if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine. I'll better go and see how the dogs... There's one dog up here, Callie, and the other two are downstairs, and they're quiet. They're probably asleep, but they may be doing wicked things like chewing something, which I hope they've grown out of, but they don't seem to have. Anyway, that's what I'm off to do now, and wait for Sheila with a nice cup of tea to warm her up when she comes back from her solstice fire ceremony, which apparently is very cold, despite there being a fire.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so? Isn't that so?